Welcome to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. Peter, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, man. Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone out there listening?
Yeah, sure. I'm Peter Coogan, or Dr. Peter Coogan, if that makes you feel better. Uh, I got a PhD in American Studies at Michigan State University. Turned my dissertation, which was the antediluvian age, the evolution of the superhero from Daniel Boone to Batman. Actually, I think it's the emergence of the superhero. But anyway, we can all look that up later. And then turned it into a book, Superhero: The Secret Origin of the Genre. In 1992, I co-founded the Comics Arts Conference, which is with Randy Duncan, a professor from Henderson in Arkansas, and it's been running at the San Diego Comic-Con ever since. And we just had our 30th anniversary, depending how you count things, because of one year that we didn't do it in 1997 and another year that we didn't do it because of COVID. So
How'd
what
you
is
get? Let's say, how'd you get an interest in superheroes?
Sure. I went on, and this was the origin of my dissertation too. The origin of my dissertation is what the hell happened to me in 1974 in California. So in 1974, we went on a family trip. Both my sets of grandparents lived in California. So we went out there, and my mom, for some reason that don't understand, and she's passed, let us buy comic books, or suggested that we buy comic books. I don't really know. And so I got Captain America 176. We got Marvel 2-in-1 #4, and we got an issue of Black Panther drawn by Jack Kirby that my older brother later ripped up because he didn't like the art. I have the other two. And I don't know, it just took to it. And then I saw the Batman TV show. And I remember my grandparents, it was 1974, there's no VCRs,
Wait, is
right?
this West or Keegan?
Uh, what?
Adam West or
Oh,
Keegan?
Adam, this is 1974.
Okay.
So this is the Batman TV show, Adam West.
I was born in '97, so I'm trying
Yeah,
to.
no, it's okay. And I remember saying, we've got to get home. We've got to get home, because I wanted to see that show so badly, right? And so then I got back to Kent, Ohio. We had a comic book shop too, actually. I got a paper route. I started buying comics. And there was something about superheroes that interested me. And then I was going to be a comic book writer, although I didn't actually do the things like write that you need to become a writer. And also, I was reading the Comics Journal, and I was just like, I don't think the comic book industry is a very good place to work, you know? And I realized that I could be a okay comic book writer, but my undergraduate advisor, Vera Camden, said 5 most important words of my life. I was going to roll over. I was graduating in December, and I was going to roll over into taking a semester of grad school at Kent State University before I moved with my then girlfriend to Atlanta. And so I needed to fill out a form that said, area of intellectual interest or area of interest. And I didn't know what to put down. I was thinking about some kind of thing about heroes. And Vera Camden said, why don't you study comics? I was like, I can do that? And then my girlfriend and I broke up, and I decided, also my Mac Hassler, Professor Mac Hassler, passed me in the hallway that fall and said, so where are you going to grad school? And I was like, I, I didn't know I was going to grad school. My dad was a college professor, and I'd known Mac Hassler since I was like 2. Um, and so then I looked into it. I decided to get a master's degree in popular culture from Bowling Green and a PhD in American Studies from Michigan State, because they had the comics, right? They had the programs and they had the comics. And that's how I ended up in the academic side of comic and superheroes. And I sorry, go ahead.
I was about to say, what did you notice about the, I guess, more of the academic study side of comics? Like, I can look at it as a casual observer and be like, well, like I said, talking to you off air about the 60s and 70s, the invasion of like Hollywood and kind of by the FBI. What I noticed was like Batman. Who's Batman always tied to? Is has this authority figure? It's Commissioner Gordon. I mean, obviously he's still Batman. He can doesn't have to listen to Commissioner Gordon, but there's still this like attachment to authority. And whether that's like to me, that as a public observer, I'm like, I can see that. And then you kind of start noticing everywhere. But I'm wondering what the academic side of like looking into what the meaning is.
Well, it was more that, I was always like, I was good at college. That was something I was good at, and I still am. In fact, what I do now for a living is I usher students into, at the academic discourse community, basically. I make better students for a living. Um, and so I just took to it. I'd written a paper on Mage, the Hero Discovered, and I presented it at the Popular Culture Association conference. I was taking a King Arthur class, and I wrote it for that, and then went to this conference and was like, "Oh, this is fun." And then it was more like I realized I could be a really good comics professor or just an okay comics writer, and so it was really just the like this is an unplowed field, in terms of academics, that there just wasn't anything really been done in it at that point, really not much. And I was good at it. And so I liked it. And so, it's interesting the thing you say about Commissioner Gordon and authority figures. That marks why superheroes are not vigilantes. People make that mistake. A vigilante enacts the punishment, right? That's why the Punisher is a vigilante. He actually does the punishment, which is he kills people. Um, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, they don't enact the punishment. They really act as extensions of existing legitimate authority. Batman turns the Joker over to the police, right? Doesn't strangle him like he just turns him over to the police because they believe in the authorities. They believe in, society and culture
The justice system.
do the right thing, right? Whereas vigilantes don't. Vigilantism is a sign of a breakdown in belief in the regular authorities and the power of society. That's why when police wear that thin blue line and wear the Punisher, T-shirt, the chevron with the line on it, they're saying police don't matter. It's really a messed up thing that police use the Punisher. The Punisher and Jerry Conway, the creator of the Punisher, actually said this, that when police use the Punisher as a symbol, they're saying the police are ineffective and useless. Why would they say that about themselves? Because they don't have an academic understanding of superheroes.
I think they look at the skull and think it's cool, much like everybody has like camo and thinks that, they're a veteran or they wear like army fatigues or something like that. Even though that's like, what is that? Stolen valor. But some people wear like army pants or they wear whatever, but they'll wear like a custom shirt and everyone sees them and go, maybe that person served. It was like, I don't think so. Maybe they just bought some pants at a thrift store.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because I have a pair of army uh, camouflage pants that I had in high school, and I can still wear. They're the most comfortable pants.
Good job for you for fitting into your pants from high school. Holy hell.
Well, actually, that's because I have a superpower, but, they're not, military fatigues, they're American Eagle, but if you looked at the back of them, they're patched, and my kids are like, "Get rid of those pants." I'm like, "No, no, no, you don't understand. If pants are 40 years old, the goal is to get them to be 80 years old and die in them."
Yeah.
The superpower that I have and is that, I have gut bacteria. You get gut bacteria, your microbiome from your mother. When you come out, if you're born vaginally, come out and you get it all over your face and over your body, and that's where you get your gut.
Called placenta.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's placenta, but it's just smeared all of you. And then my brothers have it too, and my mom had it. Sugar has no calories for us.
Wait, what?
Sugar has no calories. I can consume whatever I want in sugar. candy, chocolate, ice cream, beer, and it has no calories. It doesn't have any effect on me. Nuts, if I eat nuts, like mixed nuts, I gain weight. But calories, like sugar, carbs, it's irrelevant. I can eat 1,500 calories of, or actually 1,440, which is a sleeve of fun size candy bars. You can tell I've done that more than once. I can just eat it for no reason on any day, more than once a day, multiple times a week. I was talking to my chiropractor about it because I said, I don't understand like calories and weight and stuff because they say, calories in, calories burned, right? And I'm like, but then how can I consume like an extra 2,000 calories in a day as long as it's sugar and nothing happens? And she said, bugs eat sugar. So I have a symbiote, and that's my superpower.
Damn, dude, I'm actually really jealous just because I like to eat like a 5 pound bag of chocolate peanut M&Ms in one sitting, and that would really wreck me like the next day. I would definitely gain weight from that. I'm a very obviously you see my jacket, family fitness. I work at a fitness place. I'm a fitness guy. So like that's always the dream is like just burn off all these like calories that you just consumed with cake and then eventually just stop eating it to where you don't want it anymore. So now I don't even have the craving really.
Well, no, it's actually I don't burn it off. It never goes into my body. The gut bacteria consume it, and then it goes out.
But you taste it, right?
Oh yeah,
Okay, well
I get
that's
it
good.
here. I just don't get it here.
That's good.
And actually, I know we're off, but this is when people I use this to talk about in my class on superheroes. I use this. What do you call somebody who has a power that's above and beyond ordinary mortals, and is out there trying to do good every day? And they go superhero. I'm like, so I'm a superhero. They're like, no. It's like, well, I have this power, and I work with students and do things and trying to help people, so I'm doing good. That's mission and powers, right? Trying to do good, mission, hero, powers, superhero. But a superhero is not a superhero. This is the distinction. Um, and like that's something people don't understand, that the superhero genre is a genre unto itself, like a western, rom-com, melodrama, science fiction, horror, detective, gangster, medical. All of these are separate genres using the kind of popular genres approach, not the literary genres approach or the save the cat genres approach, but the popular narrative genres. And that's what my book is about, actually, really trying to say, look, superheroes are superheroes. So a superhero, a hero who is super, there's lots of those. Beowulf, Gilgamesh, Luke Skywalker, people who have powers, super, and are doing good, hero. But that space between those two words, superhero, superhero. Superheroes started with Superman because genre is about imitation and repetition. And the thing is, earlier figures like that people put forward as superheroes didn't produce imitation and repetition. Superman did. Superman produced Batman, right? Vin Sullivan supposedly said to Bob Kane, "We need another superhero." And then Bob Kane went out and got with Bill Finger, and they created Batman. Um, Other figures, the Shadow, Popeye, um, Spring-Heeled Jack, anybody, the Phantom. Even the Phantom's not a superhero. People think he is, but he's not. He would be if you created him now, but he wasn't when he was created. And how do you know? Because nothing else came about. Whereas Superman came out, and then in the year there was like the Arrow, who really wasn't a superhero, um, and Batman. And the interesting thing is, Will Eisner created Wonder Man to imitate Superman, right? Directing. He's a radio reporter, his name is Wonder Man. He's exactly a ripoff, and that's why they got sued. But Batman is nothing like Superman, except they both have mission, pro-social, selfless mission, powers, right? Superpowers, advanced abilities. Doesn't have to be supernatural, just can be like advanced abilities, extraordinary abilities, right? Batman has extraordinary abilities, technology, that kind of stuff. And then identity, and identity is code name and costume, iconic code name and costume. Because you take like the Shadow has an iconic name, code name, right? He's shadowy presence. But try to draw the Shadow in a simple, like just anybody can draw that. No, you can't. Draw a Superman chevron, the S symbol, or a Batman. You can draw that. Anybody can draw that. It's iconic. It boils. Scott McCloud talked about amplification through simplification. Superman and Batman, you boil them down to their chest symbols, their chevrons. You can do it. You can't do that with Doc Savage. You can't do that with the Phantom Detective. You can't do that with the Shadow. That's the difference. Also, if you look at them, which one is Batman? The guy with a bat. Which one is Spider-Man? The guy with a Spider-Man. Which one is James Bond? The guy in the tuxedo. No, that's Daniel Craig from a different movie, right? I do this when I teach it, and I'll put up these, and I'll put up a picture of Daniel Craig from Road to Perdition, and they'll say James Bond. I'm like, no, that's a gangster in the 1930s, not a British guy at all, right? So these things are important.
It's interesting because it's kind of like the 90s, like the 90s. So many of the songs sound so similar because they're either complaining about a bad relationship or a girl that they miss, or they complain about a truck or something like that. And it's like you can't I guess defer from Nickelback compared to Theory of a Dead Man, at least in the way that they sound. I mean, sometimes when listening to Theory of a Dead Man, I'm like, is this did something happen on my phone where I have to check and go, oh, it's Nickelback actually. It's not Theory of a Dead Man, but it's similar stuff. But that's just like branding. That's really good branding, like Superman, red, white, and blue, or not red, white, and
Yeah,
blue, but red
red,
and
white, and
blue.
yellow, red, blue, and yellow.
So you're just like, I mean, that the whole symbol on the chest, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, but that's just easy for a lot of people to remember as well, too. That's why it sticks so flashy in our heads. What I think is interesting is I don't remember if it's Christopher Reeves, but in the superhero show, when it was black and white, to make the colors stand out and pop more, he was wearing like browns because it shows really that's interesting. But I mean, I don't know, it's a little bit of an aside, but see, like I like all like the background kind of impact that it has in people in general. I think like a lot of times, like especially when we're kids, even if you're just dabbled into the realm of superheroes, I mean, you associate it with powers. Usually they're either born with these powers, something like a super crazy ability, or they got it from something. The one I usually get compared to, because I kind of look like Tom Holland, is Spider-Man. Um, the whole bit by a spider thing coming out of a laboratory. I mean, I guarantee you there was plenty of people that thought that they could get a job at a research facility and then hopefully come across a spider that would have some type of power where they would get that. And these are obviously childhood fantasies, but these are what people start to dream about, like flying, super strength. And it does kind of deter from like what the modern day superhero really is. And you hear that example a lot, like policemen. I would consider my milkman a modern day super, or when there were milkmen, modern day superheroes, delivering something that you essentially need as well too. But there's obviously deeper realms of where it goes. But I mean, everywhere in our culture, and it's not a surprise why even today, like it's just cranking out superhero movies all the time because they found this vein, which is, I would also say, childhood innocence. There is a lot of like our childhoods that necessarily we got to grow up and we kind of put some stuff down. And there is that. Like my friend's like 30 years old, he's a state trooper, and he's like, let's go see the new Marvel movie. Let's go see Doctor Strange 2, and let's go see this. And I'm like, man, they're going a little bit deeper than I thought they would. Like when I watched spoiler alert, Black Bolt's head explode, I was like, I got up in the theater and I shouted, and I've never done that before in my entire life. It made me, and I was just sitting there calm, and I saw it, and it happened, something unexpected, but it keeps you wanting to go back and seeing this, and you start realizing that there's a whole swath of people that are involved in these theaters. They're not just like certain, new age kids or older generations. It's the whole spectrum of people that are enjoying these movies, because there is this untapped kind of childhood vein of fantasy, I would say.
I would say you're wrong,
Okay, that's fair.
and I'll tell you why. If
Wish you
if
would have
that
told
were
me 20 minutes ago before I ranted.
that's the way you learn is, and I'm being a little bit facetious. Is but the way you learn is you learn better when you go into a situation thinking one thing and it turns out you're wrong, and then you learn, you get your head flipped on it and you remember that better. Whereas if you go in thinking something and you learn the thing that you already thought, you don't really remember it as well. It's weird. Our brains are weird. No, the reason I say that is if this were a kind of universal thing. Now, hero stories are universal, right? If you look at the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell and all that, that's adolescence, separation, initiation, and return, right? It's a brave man slowly wise. Those have always been around because those stories are how you take boys and turn them into men. What happens is they get power, testosterone hits them 13, 14 years old, and they get really big, right? Well, if you and your tribe don't do something with that, it gets turned inward, right? And they end up destroying each other. And that's why you've got to turn it, warrior cultures, you've got to turn it outward, right? Put it on the enemy. Take that testosterone strength and put it on the enemy. And so hero stories have always existed. And if you look at the hero's journey, it's a psychological thing. It's about becoming a responsible adult, right? You go and you learn something, you get some power, and you come back to society with a gift that you are going to put towards the benefit of your group. Those stories have always existed. And so if you want to make that case, yeah, that's great. But if you talk about superheroes, well, why weren't there always superhero stories? Because superheroes are a genre. They started with Superman. Siegel and Schuster got an idea. They did something different. It's old wine in new bottles, admittedly. They stole a bunch of stuff from a bunch of places, but they put it together in a new way. And then imitation and repetition. And genres follow, they have certain syntax, they follow certain things in order. If you look at this, it's too bad with that Raiders of the Lost Ark that they never made a second movie. It's really too bad because same thing with Star Wars. They only made 2 Star Wars movies, and they never made a Avatar, the Last Airbender movie. It's really too bad that they never did that.
They made a Last Airbender
No,
movie. It was
no,
not
they
good though.
didn't. No, they didn't. There is no live
Oh
action
God, it
Avatar
was
movie.
terrible.
There is not.
My
Anyway,
childhood was. I like the Green Lantern though, so I mean,
yeah, yeah.
people, even
Well,
Ryan Reynolds hates that one.
yeah, yeah. But anyway, but the point of that is that's my little joke about, oh, this stupid. They should have made another Indiana Jones movie because the second Indiana Jones movie is not Indiana Jones archaeologist. It's Indiana Jones superhero. It has the syntax of a superhero movie, right? Um, and and that syntax, the events and the order and the action and so forth, like that can run through all things. It's the semantics. It's costume, right? It's the identity, it's the powers. Those are the things that make you put the syntax and the semantics together, and that's why people get confused about what superheroes are, is because they see just the semantics, just the powers, for example, or they see just the syntax, and then again the order, and so um,
Could I challenge on the Indiana Jones thing with when he becomes a superhero? Is that just because they made a secondary?
he doesn't become a superhero. The second movie, Temple of Doom, follows what's called the American monomyth. And that's the superhero, that's the basic superhero narrative. So the hero's journey is like the superhero origin, right? And then the sort of monthly adventures follow the American monomyth and or the adventure cycle. And so it's a town, peaceful, a community with a paradisial community, and then outside evil arises. The superhero rises up to expel the evil, and then the community returns to its peaceful nature. That's what happens, and that's basically what happens in Temple of Doom, right? It's a little bit different than that, but that's basically that's that, and that's why that movie isn't. I thought it wasn't very good because it completely got away from Indiana Jones, the archaeologist adventurer. And then the third one, um,
My favorite.
yeah, well, it just redid the first one.
I like the
It's like,
Crystal Skull.
yeah, oh, I haven't seen that because I watched the South Park version of it, and I was just like, oh, I don't want to watch that. Uh,
Well, he picked
um,
up a characteristic which is I don't think was intended was in the beginning. I mean, yeah, they gave him a whip and they gave him all like the kind of the old school like weird archaeology stuff, but then now like you show that hat to anybody, immediately everyone either wants to play Indiana Jones, and I don't think that was intended. I think that just kind of happened, but eventually it does become what you were talking about, which is like the second movie had to be going and doing this giant adventure where now he's just not an archaeologist anymore is this thing. It starts to become there's a task. It's like why there's always these good and evil type things. comics, if there's a hero, then there has to be a villain to kind of rival him. I might be wrong in saying that, but I feel like with a lot of movies, especially when they start to kind of be really kind of run through the ringer a little bit, where they keep making more and more and more. And some of them I really enjoy, but it is like, oh, he's got another person he's got to fight, or he's got another big bad guy, and it kind of becomes a little bit unpredictable. That's why I like movies like The Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, where I thought that was really interesting. It's not a superhero movie, but it was a little bit about the kind of the culture. And what it kind of showed was like how he got this way, which I think was really interesting because I think through a lot of that movie, people can relate to a lot of things that he was doing.
And going back to what I'm actually, I do this thing where I work parenthetically. I start out with something, I have a little parentheses, I continue, I have a little parentheses. So what I was originally saying was that, so Superman came up 1938, and then you got Imitation, and then you immediately got the Superman cartoons from Fleischer, and then the Batman movie serial, and the Superman movie serial. And if you ever seen those look bad. Like the costumes are awful, the fighting is bad. Kirk Allen gets something about Superman that's really good, but to have him fly, they had to turn him into animation. And then George Reeves in the Superman TV show, those are super limited, and like when they shoot and the bolts would bounce off his chest, but then they throw a gun at him and he duck. Like it doesn't make sense. Superman just has the gun bounce off his eyeball, right? No. Um, and then Batman, actually, the Batman TV show actually did a good job of reproducing the comic books. That's what people don't understand, is it's an excellent adaptation of the comic books at the time. And if you don't like the comic books at the time, sure, don't like the show, but you can't say it's not Batman. Then what happened was Superman, you will believe a man can fly, right? Superman, the first Superman movie, got it. Reeves looked good in that costume. He looked like Superman, right? And since then, and this is Michael Uslan's theory. He's the producer of all the Batman movies, because back in 1974 he bought the rights to the Batman movies from DC Comics for very little money because they didn't think they could make Batman movies, and so he's the permanent producer of the Batman movies. He's a
Damn.
smart guy. What he said was that it used to be that you really had to work hard to convince the studios to make superhero movies, because the people running the studios didn't grow up reading comics and superheroes, right? And you did what you could, and you made it work, and you could do good things like the Keaton, the Tim Burton Keaton Batman movies, the Superman movie, right? Richard Donner, for example, loved superheroes, and that's why Superman 1 and Superman 2 are good, because Richard Donner loves superheroes. um but then what happened after that is, just because of age, the people who moved up, what happens is people in their 40s and 50s approve directors in their 20s and 30s, right? And so what happened eventually was people who had grown up reading comics and superheroes started to move from making stuff to approving stuff. They started moving from creator to producer. And they were willing, they were like, yeah, that sounds good. It didn't sound crazy to them anymore because they grew up with it. And so there's been a whole shift in Hollywood, that people are now old enough to make decisions who are young enough to have grown up where superheroes were fairly normal in terms of reading comics. And the second thing that happened is the technology, right? You look at George Reeves, and he's lying on when he's flying, he's lying on a glass box or something like that. Or it's terrible, right? And he goes and jumps, and there's a springboard, and he jumps out, right? And he's on wires that are bad. If you've seen that movie Hollywoodland, that's about the death of George Reeves, they show Ben Affleck, he's on these wires and he's falling and stuff, it was uncomfortable. But now, like, if you look at the Spider-Man costume, that was the thing I was really amazed about, in the Spider-Man movies was that costume looked good. You know, they don't look ridiculous anymore. I mean, Adam West is kind of doughy and he was perfect for what he was, but he's not Ben Affleck. He's not, Val Kilmer. As silly as that Val Kilmer movie was, he looked good. He's not, Christian Bale. Um, and he's not look at even Zachary Levi, who was in a padded suit anyway, he got jacked, you know, and you look at Chris Evans, when he does that helicopter thing,
Yeah.
or when he comes out of the capsule, or Wolverine, Hugh Jackman, those bodies, or even Kamal Nanjiani, right? Have you seen that picture of
Yeah.
him? Like what Chris Evans said is, you want to get jacked, hire a Marvel trainer, have him kick your ass. Like they know how to make superhero bodies now. They didn't in the past. And so the technology of it, there's a couple of things. One is that there's the production end of it. Two, they had good ones, right? Imitation and repetition. I remember when the X-Men movie came out, I went and saw it, and my reaction to was this was 2 years to remember after Clooney's Batman. My reaction was, it doesn't suck. And that was high praise. And then I was at the Comic-Con and I ran into somebody who said there was this whole series of superhero movies, Iron Man, Green Lantern, all this stuff in a line. And they were waiting to see what happened with the X-Men. And the X-Men was good and it made money and they all got more money and they all moved forward. So you had good product that could be imitated. And then at a bigger level, in the 1950s and 60s, Westerns were big, right? Now, Westerns started out being useful in the 30s, but they were, odors, they were horse operas, they were B movies, because you could make them fairly cheaply, right? On the backlots. And then in the 50s and 60s, Westerns became the kind of big genre, right? Although they weren't really making that much money, but there were a lot of them. They were solid. It's because they represented the Cold War. You had two societies in an apocalyptic struggle. And then at the moment, the hero, the man in the middle, throws his weight on the side of one of them and they win. The US and the Soviet Union, what was the Truman Doctrine? Containment. You keep the Reds on the reservation, right? Red communists, you keep them behind the Iron Curtain. And all the presidents from Truman to Bush all were Westerns fans. They all liked Westerns. And Reagan, of course, was in Westerns. And then what happened was the Cold War ended, and the Powell Doctrine is a superhero doctrine. You fly in with overwhelming force. And we didn't go to war with Iraq. We went to war with Saddam Hussein. We didn't go to war with Panama. We went after a supervillain, Noriega, right? And then Osama bin Laden came along. That's Hydra, right? That's an incredible wealthy person with an army of suicide people, right? He's a literal supervillain because he had a wound that he then wanted to take out on the rest of society and fix things. He wanted to turn the world over and fix the world. That's what a supervillain wants to do. And so the post-Cold War world is a superhero world, right? It's a world in which we've attempted in our geopolitics to be superheroes, to have America as superhero. So that way, the genres that are popular don't just express some eternal longing, like you're talking about fantasy and childhood and stuff. They express geopolitics, they express mythology. And so the other thing is the transhuman, right? We all have superpowers. I have a device. I can see what's happening in the other side of the world. I can talk to people, right, who are not here. I can know everything, right? These are superpowers. And if you look at like sports, A-Rod, right? Great athlete. He had to take steroids because baseball is no longer a human activity. Baseball is a post-human activity. So we have to figure out, what are we going to do with these superpowers and these super abilities? Well, the way you deal with that yourself is you go out and you consume media that deals with that. It's mythological, right? It's symbolic. It's metaphorical. That's why we like superheroes now, because they say something about how we live today, both geopolitically and like interpersonally, and how we have to adjust to technology. This is why superheroes came up really popularly in World War II. If you look at Nazi ideology and American ideology, they exactly differ. And superheroes embody American ideology. And if you want me to go into that further, I'll have to pull up my the talk I gave on it. But and that's why Nazis always work as supervillains, but commies don't. Communists don't work as supervillains, but Nazis do.
Do you
So
think
that was a long answer.
Do you think that there's I guess a line that gets kind of drawn where you can have some things that kind of I guess symbolize realism of the real world or real problems that people experience, and then there's when it becomes too real, where there's still a disconnect with the superhero aspect of things. Like I feel like a lot of times when people go see a superhero movie, they want to see actions, they want to see cars being thrown around, they want to see all that type of stuff. But if you made like a movie that kind of symbolized more realistic events or serious issues. Like I think there was episode I did with Ryan where he talked about green. I don't know if it was Green Arrow or Green someone, but there was like a heroin problem that they were experiencing. One of the comics. I go, I feel like if you made a movie that had that in there, there would like even with the show The Boys. I love that show. It's fantastic. But it's like I like Black Adam too because Black Adam was like finally no more talking, just fucking go in there and do it. That's what I like, and it was awesome. Some people have problems with it. They said it was too fast paced. But with The Boys, it's very real. It's like the opening scene, dude runs super fast and goes right through somebody. I was like, I always wondered why isn't the Flash ever accidentally run through anybody? You know, any of these types of instances that happen in
Well, the
movies,
Flash would vibrate through them.
he wouldn't explode through them.
No, no, the Flash, remember, can pass through. He vibrates and he can pass through solid matter.
That's how they get around not showing it.
Yeah,
That's why.
that's how they get around not showing it.
But I think like with The Boys, I think that it shows a lot like a different, darker side. Like DC kind of shows a lot of darker stuff compared to what like sometimes what Marvel shows. At least before, like I saw Doctor Strange, like I said, Black Bolt's head exploding was like, Jesus, this is a Marvel film. Um, but The Boys showed more of a darker side with alcohol, drugs, and they still kind of seemed attached to this human side where it just seemed like humans with really extraordinary abilities, like one rare thing. Homelander seems like the only kind of superhero in a sense when I watch it. The other ones, and then Soldier Boy as well too. But then the other guys, like dude has gills on his his chest or something like that, and he could talk to animals, but it's nothing like super supreme, like living underwater his whole life, like Aquaman or anything of that extremeness, where there's still this kind of sense of just people that have some attached to human ability where you can still kind of see the line between, okay, they're a human with extraordinary abilities rather than just being 100% a superhero where you don't even see a person attached to it. You just see you don't want to piss that person off.
Yeah, well, Boys is satire, and it's great, and it's way better than the comic book. The comic book is actually kind of crap, but that's one of those things where the adaptation transformed it into something really great. Um, and I'm using the Boys in my at least like the first episode, although then the students can write about it if they want. I'm teaching superheroes this spring. Um, and but the thing you have to remember, your question about it is that you know people want to feel good, right? Like most people don't go see, the Seventh Seal about a knight playing chess with death. Most people, we don't have a fantasy genre. Well, we do kind of a fantasy genre is about child abuse, but not realistic depictions of these things. They do exist, but it's the difference between formulaic and mimetic art, right? Mimetic art, mimesis, is imitation of reality, and then on the other end is formulaic. Formulaic is where it's about, it basically makes you feel better as an audience member, right? You know, and um those are the two sort of poles. And stuff that's more on the mimetic side it shows you the world as it is, it shows you people as they are, and that's not good generally, right? Like, you know, whereas formulaic shows you the way the world you want it to be. You know, you you tend to associate with characters you want to be like, right? Heroes. They're who you want to be. Um, and so the other thing is, and this comes from the American Monomyth by Jewett and Lawrence, mythic massage. This is where superheroes, if you look at Iron Man, is a great example of this, right? Remember, Iron Man came out in 2008, right after Abu Ghraib, right? Where Americans were torturing Iraqis. So what happens in the movie? Middle Easterners torture an American. It's a mythic reversal, right? You take the same image, but you flip the parties. So then the audience can feel better about itself, right? We didn't get a whole lot of, we got Zero Dark 30, but we didn't get a lot of things coming out of the Iraq War showing how terrible we are. We did in Vietnam War, but it happened through Westerns, like Soldier Blue and Little Big Man. And there's a bunch of Vietnam Westerns. The Western was used like to explore race relations, because you can look at white and red and it's okay, whereas what you're really looking at is white and black. But it's plausible deniability. It's like science fiction. Star Trek did that a lot. They did a lot of things where they were really commenting on issues of the day, but oh no, it's just space westerns. It's just people running around with ray guns, pew pew pew. Star Wars made us feel better about Vietnam, because in Star Wars, right, the US is the evil empire in Vietnam. But in Star Wars, we're the rebels, we're the Viet Cong, you know? And the reason people respond to stuff like that, and yeah, it's a good movie, right? It's entertaining. My kids it's funny, I have daughters, and my older daughter didn't want to see Star Wars. Why? Because all these boys in grade school, right? They like Star Wars. She doesn't like them, so she doesn't like Star Wars. We showed her Star Wars. She was like, "That was good." We're like, "Yeah, it's a good movie." These things happen, and you don't have to think about it, and it's just good. It's fun. It's entertaining. But the deeper meaning of it, and the deeper message is, it takes something and it allows you to feel better about yourself. Superman did the same thing. In the 1970s, I was alive then, and stuff wasn't that great. People didn't like what was going on. People didn't like the world. People didn't like America. And Superman comes along and he can fly, and he's this, positive character, right? And so both things happen when you read, but people like escapist stuff because it helps them to escape. But
Bread
in
and
a sense,
circus.
all literature is escapist. Yes, it makes you feel better for a while. It's about a change of consciousness, because you can't deal with the real world all the time. Your brain just isn't capable of it. And but we don't have a popular genre of billion-dollar movies that are about child abuse, realistic depictions of child abuse, because I don't want to see that. you know we don't have occasionally get something like um uh um
The most recent was Black Phone.
yeah, oh god, don't talk to me about Black Phone. I can't stand it. My daughter, here's the thing, my 15-year-old daughter loves that movie.
It's a pretty good movie.
Loves it. It's a horrible movie.
I
I
mean, it's
can't
it's
stand
it's
it.
not good about all the kids dying and
No,
everything, but
I'm not saying it's not a well-produced movie. It's a well-produced movie and a well-told story. I just can't stand it. I didn't like any of the characters. I didn't attach to them. Why does my 15-year-old daughter like it? Because it's about kids overcoming evil adults who don't care about them, right? For kids, that's a powerful movie. Her friends love it. Their friends love it. And they're going to go to Comic-Con. They're picking out their Black Phone costumes. And I'm like, they're just kids. They're just dressed like ordinary kids.
from the
Oh,
70s though.
from the 70s when I was alive. But see, that's the thing, is like for them, the 70s are like this fantasy environment, like the 40s was for me when I grew up,
I
right?
was watching it the whole time thinking Red Foreman was gonna come out saying he's gonna put his foot in somebody's ass.
Exactly. It's like, no, we started watching it because they wanted us to watch it, and, we turned it off. We just couldn't stand it. And, but part of that's because it's about looking at it from the parents' point of view, and the kids are victims, and it's awful. Um, and, you know
I don't have kids, but I viewed it from that point of view, which from a parent's point.
yeah, well, um, anyway, so, I just didn't like it. It was just ugly movie and stuff, but
It was a lot. It definitely wouldn't be something that you would wanna watch, like, with if you're having a bunch of friends over trying to have a good time. It's more like if you're on, like, a date night or something and you really wanna, get a little bit nervous and scared and you wanna get close.
no, my daughter has friends over to watch. She bought it. She bought it from
Jeez.
Amazon.
I don't know about that. It's not that kind of film for me.
It is that kind of film for her, for them, um, you know? But that's what I mean is that for a kid, Black Phone, you know, gives you a way of understanding the world where adults don't make sense. They do the wrong thing, they suck, they're mean, right? Um, and you triumph by overcoming them. Makes perfect sense for a teenager to like that movie. Makes perfect sense for a, 57-year-old man to not like that movie. And it's not inherently about the quality of the movie. Ethan Hawke's a good actor, right? I mean, the acting in that movie was good. It was too good. It was too realistic. I just felt bad watching it. I felt bad what was happening to those kids. I didn't enjoy it at all, right? Whereas watching A Train run through Huey's girlfriend was great, man. Watching, oh God, I did this thing where I showed them. Have you seen the TV show Invincible?
Yeah, yeah, they're making a second season. It's coming out this year.
Yeah. Well, I read the comics, and of course, in the comics, it takes 6 issues, and I'm gonna do this with my students this year too. I'm doing and Invincible, it's like it's this great kinda reconstructive genre. It makes everything work. Like, you know, he works as a superhero, the costume works, the names work, the power, everything works. And then the thing, and I don't know if we should do spoilers. Hey, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen or read Invincible, turn this off right now. And then come back in about 2 or 3 minutes. I had watched Invincible, and I watched it first, so I knew what was gonna happen. I wanted to see how they handled the thing that happens. Let's just put it that way. People who've watched it know what it is.
Say it, just
So,
say it.
okay. Yeah, when Omni-Man rips apart the Guardians, the Global Guardians,
Yeah, that's fucking intense,
eats
man.
their heads and stuff. Oh, man, it is, and they're like, "Oh, it must be mind control. It must be," like, they're trying to come up with every explanation you can come up with, the same explanations the characters in the show are coming up with, and I'm like, "Nope, nope." But it was perfect because they were not expecting it at all, right? They did not know what was happening. And I remember that when I read the original, I was like, what is going on? You know, and it's this great moment of shock and horror. But it's okay. It's fun. It's fun to see him
Yeah.
grab his head, and he just like whacks right through her head. And you know,
And
um,
it goes so quick, and the best thing they did is they didn't play any, like, background noise, they just had the sound effects of, like, the breaking, no music or anything playing, just that, and it was like, "Oh my god." And to me, I watched that over and over again on YouTube. I had to keep watching that fighting because it was just so, like, intense where I was like, "Damn, you don't expect that." I know it's a cartoon and all that, but what got me about that show was when the dad and his son fought, and then at the ending, like, his dad beats him to, like, a pulp, and then he has to fly away, like, that, like, I felt that here. I was like, "Damn."
right. No, that's that moment where he's just like all of a sudden he realizes that he loves his son, and that he has to rethink his life because it turns out he's become attached to these earthlings. And like in The Boys, when the Deep goes, to Starlight, like, he pulls his pants down and he's like, you know, do it. Like, he's playing number two and stuff. Well, yeah, I want to see that, but I haven't seen that movie about Harvey Weinstein. I don't want to see Harvey Weinstein do that to, Rose McGowan. I don't want to watch that movie.
I think it shows more realistic of what would happen if we actually had superheroes that were more in contact with like the general public. I mean, there's always questions I had of why always superheroes had to isolate themselves and have this layer type deal. I mean, that's why I like Shazam. Like I like Shazam because I think it's I mean, you look at it, you're like, this is what would happen if a kid got superpowers. Like
Exactly.
besides him being like a giant in a grown man's body, he's like 12 years old and he has superpowers. And I think like that helped me relate a lot to like exactly what I would do. I would go to and they get beer and then they taste the beer and it tastes horrible and they go back in
Yeah,
to get
beer
like
does taste
Slurpees and beef
horrible.
jerky. Yeah, it does. So I think that's like very relatable. And most of the time you don't really see that about a superhero figure.
Yeah, no, it got it, and one of the things about, the boys shows what would happen with superheroes and corporations and so forth, right? And when they do bad things, it would get covered up, people get bought off, just like corporations do now. I'm working on a superhero novel called Odd Men, um, and in it I have what I call the politeness patrol, which is that it's the Bat Detective, Strong Man, and the Amazon, right? It's Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, um, you know, types. And the Politeness Patrol is, look, I started off with Strong Man's walking along and he sees, comes up and he's been called to the place and there's like down in the street, there's a broken window, and then this guy in a suit comes flying out. He's a gangster, right? Splat, and he gets up there, and it's Our Man, or I call him Out. It's down, count down, and count out. Because if your powers, you had your powers for an hour, don't call yourself Our Man, because you know what? Criminals will just dodge you for an hour and they'll shoot you in the head. Um, anyway, so effectively, he's throwing these guys out because they killed his partner, and he goes, "Oh, all of them." Strongman goes, "All of them." Well, that guy, okay, one more. You get one more. So he throws him out the window, and then they take the rest of them and they send him off to Doc Savage, right? Doc Farrell's island to get brain surgery to get removed, including Out, right? They're down, including the Hourman figure, because if you break it, if it's okay for you to have a sexual indiscretion or have a drinking problem or something like that. But when you start throwing people off the roof, Strongman, Bat Detective, and the Amazon come along and say, "Don't do that." You get a little note, you get a bat in a box, you get Strongman looks at you and be like, "Don't do that." Right? They take you out. It's called the Politeness Patrol. Basically, that's what the police would have. That the superheroes patrol their own, because you'd have to have something to balance that. And in the boys, it's Vought, it's the corporation, right? In in remember in the Batman TV show, Batman was a duly authorized agent of the police. You know, um, there would have to be some control on superheroes, uh, um, and so it's the Sokovia Accords, right? It's that's one of the problems that they have, that superheroes have as a genre, is if I live in St. Louis, if there was somebody running around at night in a costume doing stuff, and the mayor and the police were like, "Oh, it's okay." No, it's not,
He's on
right?
drugs. He's on drugs.
Yeah, it's not cool. And so within the genre, all genres have these things you don't have to think about, you don't have to worry about, or they're just the convention. So like at one time my wife watched soap operas, grew up watching soap operas, and I did in high school. We watched General Hospital because it was good at that point. But there's stuff that happened, I thought, well, this is stupid, and then I learned it's like, oh no, they're doing the conventions well, right? They can do the conventions for a genre can be stupid, but it's whether you do it well or do it poorly. It doesn't have to be realistic, because the genre reflects on itself, right? In westerns, in the real West, yeah, they had strict gun control. You got to town and the sheriff took your guns. They didn't have shootouts in the streets, but in movies they do, because you want that escapist. You want to raise it. You want to raise the uh, um, the action, and so. superheroes would have to do that. The other thing is, like, with superheroes, wait, you have teleportation and flying cars, and why don't we have that? Like, that in Iron Man, it's clean energy from nothing, right?
Well, he made his own element in a basement. I'm like, I get Tony
No, no,
Stark's
sorry,
smart, but
element in Iron Man, in his chest,
yeah.
he makes the like, I all of those inventions would be out, and they'd completely transform the world. We'd have free power, we'd all have jetpacks, like the Legion has flight rings, and evidently they don't cost, energy from nothing, and they don't seem to cost a lot to produce. Why doesn't everybody in the 31st century have a flight ring, right? Doesn't make any sense. Um, the Justice League can teleport up to their satellite. So you're telling me somebody invented teleportation and it hasn't been commercialized? Like, that's the problem with supervillains, is if you can create a giant robot and rob a bank, why don't you just sell the robots to, like, stock grocery store shelves, right? Get rid of all retail workers, because that's what happens, right? Like, that the real bald man, right, who hates Superman, because on Amazon, what do you have? You have a bald billionaire
Lex Luthor.
whose company makes Superman look bad, right?
I
Omni-Man and Homelander.
I just
Huh.
you just made a comparison to Bezos with, Lex Luthor. That's a I
Exactly.
I've
So
never made that distinction before, but I
oh
saw him
god,
in the
no.
giant robot suit, and I kinda
Yeah.
thought about it.
So he doesn't put on a giant robot suit. What he does is he makes robots that bring, right? It used to be people had to run in Amazon where they don't run anymore. The robot brings the shelf to them. That's what Lex Luthor would do with robots, right? And as soon as they get, and these are common, as soon as they get a picker robot and a stocker robot, those Amazon warehouses will be dark and cold all the time,
'Cause you don't need
and they
lights.
won't need human beings in there.
Yeah.
That's coming, right? There's a great video called "Humans Need Not Apply" that shows what's going to happen, with technology and getting rid of jobs and so forth. That's what you would do if you were a mad scientist. You'd invent something and you'd sell it. There's a movie called The Specials. It's a James Gunn movie. It's great. Um, they have, like, there's basically the speedster character. He delivers packages. He didn't fight people. There's a character with, lasers. He's doing industrial cutting. Because it's worth far more money than, like, having somebody out there with lasers fighting bank robbers. You know, Bank robbery doesn't happen much anymore, right? Bank robbery was a big problem in the 1930s. Bank robbery is not a big problem right now. The average haul from a bank robbery is $9,000 or something.
Yeah.
And also they put the ink thing in there. It blows up. You know, and most bank robbers get caught.
I think the most recent film that showed that besides Baby Driver was, Pain and Gain with The Rock and Mark Wahlberg, and even then, I was watching this like, why is anybody robbing a bank? Like, I haven't seen that. Everything's, like, all digital now, so there's, like, no even point for that.
Right. By the way, that's right. That's where the money is. By the way, Baby Driver, I'm waiting for the sequel, right? You know what the sequel is? Daddy Driver. It's a comedy. The two, Lily James and I forget what his name is, they have kids, and he's driving them in the minivan, right? They've given up all their crime, all that stuff. And then they get revenge on, where they want him to do another job or whatever. And so he's driving around in a minivan. He's doing all that driving stuff. Baby Driver is an amazing movie. Like, that opening sequence. Oh my God. Imagine that, all of that in a minivan with kids. Edgar Wright needs to make Daddy Driver.
I would say Baby Driver would be good if they made a sequel, if it was something that was like the guy ends up making his own business and kinda doing the same thing that Kevin Spacey's character was doing.
No, no, no. It's Daddy Driver. They're in the suburbs. They have a minivan. It's a comedy. It's all the same stuff, except he does all that driving in a minivan.
Who's the who's the audience gonna be for that, though?
I don't know. Are there any? I don't know. Are there any? Say,
If you're a dad, it makes sense. But if you're talking about like for like my generation, for anybody that
I
doesn't
mean,
have kids,
that's a four quadrant movie, and here's why. Because parents, right? Kids, all that. It's all about the frustrations about like daycare, man. My kid took my kids to daycare. It's all about that, right? You get and getting your kids off to school and all about that, and driving, being a carpool, right? You know what sucks? Driving children around. It sucks. Now you add that, and then the kids, like you make it a movie, a PG rated 13 movie, so kids can go see it. The kids are also involved in it, right? Ah, fun. And then for people in the middle, it's an Edgar Wright movie. Did you see Hot Fuzz?
yeah, I loved Hot Fuzz.
I know. Edgar Wright, all of Edgar Wright's movies are great. No, he can make anything. And so if he makes Daddy Driver, that is the movie that needs to be made, man. It is that is a winner.
If I saw it, maybe I'd like it, but I'm not
Oh,
liking the
you'd like
sales
it.
pitch right now. I'm not liking
You
the
would
like.
like it. No, no. I mean, the movie writes itself. I'm hoping that somebody tells Edgar Wright, if he hasn't already thought of it. I don't care. Like, I don't care that my family thought of it, right? Like I swear, I will not sue Edgar Wright for the idea. I just want to watch the movie.
Hot Fuzz was a fantastic movie. That's probably one of my all-time favorites. I think that my top favorite is probably Big Lebowski. Those aren't necessarily superhero movies. They're more like just trippy cult comedies.
One of my favorite movie is If. Malcolm McDowell's first movie.
I don't think I've seen that.
It's Dead Poet Society with guns.
Damn.
It's great.
What about Boondock Saints?
I like Boondock Saints,
Are they
but
superheroes?
they're not.
Oh,
They're not superheroes.
damn it. I like it to be. Norman Reedus became one with The Walking Dead.
Yeah, yeah. The thing is that so let me give you an example. Boondock Saints follows superhero syntax, right? It's got some of the same things. But look, they don't have their mission. I don't remember the movie well enough to say, but their mission isn't exactly pro-social and selfless, right? Like, they're trying to I think they're trying to do good in their neighborhood. But aren't they kill people, right? They're vigilantes.
Yeah, they kill people.
Yeah, they're vigilantes. So, like, they're just vigilantes.
So does vigilantes mean that's when they kill people, they're vigilantes?
Vigilantes enact the punishment.
Okay, but be 100% honest. If you had superhero abilities besides the gut bacteria thing, but if you had like flying, super strength, teleportation, whatever the hell you wanted, would you not kill somebody if they were a really bad person? You knew if you locked them up, they're like, I'm going to come after your family next. That's like the conflict I have as a super. If I was going to be a superhero, is like, would I be able to do? I wouldn't be able to let that person live, knowing that they were going to break out and then harm the people that I cared about. I might be invincible, but they're not, and it's like, how do I fix that? And it's just easier to get rid of the problem, and
Right.
yeah.
And the problem is, you become a villain, right? Because where does it stop? Where do you draw the line?
When all the bad guys are gone,
Yeah, and that's not,
better pay your
there
fucking
aren't
taxes.
there aren't criminal people. There are not bad people. There are people who do bad things, right? And the thing is, people will do bad things as long as there's incentive, right? As long as there's a niche where somebody can benefit from doing a bad things. Now, that's not to say there aren't bad people, right? There are people who remember, like most people who are in prison have frontal lobe damage, right? They have brain damage. Their brain, because from abuse as children and other things, they actually have brain damage. They're most people who do criminal things, their brains actually don't work quite right. You know, it is a choice, but it's also within a lot of petty crime, especially a lot of things that people end up in prison for. Um, the real criminals are white collar criminals. White collar crime is like 10 or 100 times more economically damaging than what we think of as crime. But, so the thing is, the way that you, as a superhero, if you want to make the world a better place, is healthcare, education, birth control, medical care, right? Look at the societies that have low crime, and they don't have superheroes running around. What they have is they have social cohesion because the society cares about them, right? And it cares about them by providing, it's a nurturant society. It provides them with their needs, and it also prevents, big uh, um, um, gaps, in inequity, right? And so that's what you would do. It's funny because actually I just thought of this last night. I was trying to, in the end of my novel, Strongman decides to run for president, and I was trying to think of like what's the Bat-tective move, and I was listening to a show on think tanks, and it's that Batman or Bat-tective, right, forms a think tank and also gets people on the board of all those Koch brothers think tanks and stuff, and they shift the think tanks to start producing research is in quotation marks there because think tanks do isn't research, it's propaganda. They start producing propaganda that's pro-social. What I would do if I had superpowers? I would go around, and the first thing I would do is I would take out the NRA. Like if I was invisible, I'd go and take guns and shoot everybody in the NRA so that they got afraid of guns, right? Then I'd go and take the Koch brothers and say, "Oh, hey, you're going to give all your money to these people. Oh, you're not?" And then I wouldn't actually do this. And then it's like, "Oh, you're not." And then I'd bring in their kid and I'd crush his head. And I'd be like,
Good
"Okay,
God,
you
man.
want to die next. I'm not going to touch you. I'm going to kill everyone in your family.
I was way more
I
passive with
do what
mine.
I want to do." Oh no, I've thought all this out. I think about superheroes and supervillains all day,
I
right?
do this when I daydream when I'm doing like 4 hours of cardio. I'm basically just staring off, seeing like what happens if I just. The other day, I have a video of this on my phone. My heat doesn't work in my car, and it was like 20 degrees out. And I was like, man, I just wish my heat would work in my car. And I was just banging on like my basically like the car, and I started flicking, and the heat worked. And I was like, what? And I was like, oh my god, I got this on video. I was like, damn it, I just wasted a wish. I wanted superpowers, and then like you can't take it. But that is like, I mean, if I had thought about it, like I think about it all the time. Like, what would be just to fly around, teleport, do whatever that. But then it's like you just use it. Would you use it for your own nefarious gain, or
No,
would you
no.
try and be?
I would use it to keep the number of Republican senators to 39.
You're bringing your politics into superheroes. You're a superhero. You don't need your politics anymore.
The major evil in American culture right now is the Republican Party. So
I would try and find the deep state because I believe that it to be true.
no, the deep state is the Republican Party. But no, you basically reduce the Republicans to a minority in Congress, and then you kind of, you know, if the actual things that Democrats want to do, it could actually change things and make things better. Actually Ireland is doing guaranteed income for artists. That would make the world a better place, so that artists didn't have to struggle. So like if one of the great things about your generation is millennials and zoomers is like in general, you guys don't want to put I see this in students. You don't want bullshit. Like you have a very low quotient for bullshit at work. And the whole, you know, everybody needs fuck you money. Like, well, this is a libertarian thing, is the way to get rid of regulation is give everybody fuck you money. Because you know what? If somebody doesn't want to work at a company because it's shitty, nobody will work there. And then what will they do? Well, they'll clean the place up, they'll get rid of the sexual harassers, they'll make work good, right? Actually, I love seeing that students do this, is that nowadays, in my generation, we put up with bullshit. Students today, a lot of them, you can't motivate them to do things that's stupid and useless. And I think that's good for the world ultimately. But
What do you define stupid and useless?
just stuff that where there's no direct connection between what you're learning and the course objectives in a way that seems like it's going to make a difference to your life in your understanding and relationship to the world.
I think some of that woke movement crosses that boundary a little bit. They just yelled at Robert Irwing for dressing up like Jeffrey Dahmer for Halloween, and he wasn't Jeffrey Dahmer. He was the guy from the Office, Dwight Howard. He even put in the quote on his Instagram, Dunder Mifflin Company, and something that was an Office quote, and it had the music playing in the background. The woke community just said, "How dare you dress up?" And they went on a full scale rage attack against it. I go, that's the issue. It's like then it gets divulged into like if you're a white male, you must like pay for the sins of everybody. It's like I know so many things when it comes to male mental health. They won't even talk about that. They won't even acknowledge that. There's plenty of feminist historians that talk about that too. They don't believe in that concept. And I'm like, it goes a little too far sometimes.
Yeah. But the main idea here is that superheroes, if they were real superheroes, you're absolutely right. Is that if I had the ability to be invisible, you know, I'd go and change things at the think tank level. I'd go and you know what I do? Actually, I wouldn't kill people. Is that I would feed Mitch McConnell LSD every day.
Damn. That's a lot, dude.
But hey, then he wouldn't be able to do evil things, right?
That's what our government did to people.
That's what I would do. I know. I remember I read that Ultra and Ultra. You'd go through and you'd make it impossible for the legislators and the regulators and so forth to do. But then the question is like, yeah, according to who? Well, me, of course. I'm right. And that's the problem. That's when superheroes become super when they become proactive, right? If you look at like Iron Man, Force Works, right, in the 90s, or Osmandius, right, in Watchmen, is that what happens when a superhero decides to go out and be preemptive, be proactive? They become supervillains. And that's here's the thing. Bush, right? George W. Bush used superhero like the flying in and the flight suit and all that, and either with us or against us. And if he had just done Iraq, or sorry, if he'd just done Afghanistan and stopped there, okay, there's a reason to go in Afghanistan, right? Osama bin Laden's there, but the problem was he became proactive and he went into Iraq and he became a supervillain. Like if George W. Bush had just read enough comic books, we wouldn't have been in Iraq for 20 years.
I think when it comes to like if you had superpowers and what you could affect, I would stick it to only global threats. Like if it was an asteroid hitting Earth or something that because I feel like you couldn't you I mean like it's always that question, why does Superman only protect America? Does Spider-Man only protect New York or wherever the hell he's located? And I mean it brings up another question as well too, which is the team home field advantage type deal. I mean, if you look at the number of people that live in the cities where there's superheroes, or superhero movies based on either Spider-Man or wherever you want to say Tony Stark's located. I feel like a lot of those people you ask what their favorite superheroes is like, well, Spider-Man because he's New York, and it's like that's from a New York person. I mean, would you agree in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. And but of course Spider-Man can only operate um on the local level, right? He can't do it. Whereas Superman, if you ever seen um Astro City, right? The first issue of Astro City is the Samaritan who's the superhero figure. Who's the Superman figure. He what he does is he spends his whole day flying around, stopping one thing after another. And then at night he dreams of flying. That's what it would be like to be Superman, or if you've ever read Irredeemable, where the Plutonian, who's the Superman figure, Mark Waid's book, he's saving this guy's boat, and the guy gets mad because um, it got damaged, and he just gets sick of it, and then he just turns evil. Um, that what an actual superhero would do. You're right. Talk about global threats, intergalactic threats. That's why, like, again, in my novel Odd Men, I guess a little commercial for Odd Men. One of the things is that the superheroes have an agreement with the police to not handle ordinary crime unless they happen to be right there, right? Like they can stop something from happening, but basically they only handle super crime, because of that, because it then would give the police something to do. That's what Watchmen deals with that, right? In Watchmen, the police go on strike because superheroes are out there doing it for them and they don't like it. Um, these sort of things. Actually, I want to read you a little bit from Philip Wiley's novel Gladiator. It's what Siegel and Schuster ripped off to get Superman. He's basically Superman in the 1930s is that power level. He can leap like an eighth of a mile, and he's invulnerable and stuff, but he can't fly and he doesn't have heat vision.
Faster than a speeding locomotive.
Right, right. Yeah. So he says, this is the question that Hugo Danner, hero of the novel, put to himself. What would you do if you were the strongest man in the world? I would scorn the universe and turn it to my own ends. I would be a criminal. I would rip open banks and gut them. I would kill and destroy. I would be a secret invisible blight. I would set out to stamp crime off the earth. I would be a super detective following and summarily punishing every criminal until no one dared to commit a felony. What would I do? What will I do? That question, that paragraph is everything we've been talking about. Philip Wiley wrote that in published in 1933, and it sums up that superhero dilemma. You know, he at first the ego, right? I'll take, and then he's like, no, I'll become a tyrant. Because if he did that, if he followed, everybody would hate him because he would remove free will, right? If you had the ability to know everything that was going on at every time, and like stop people from doing things, nobody would have free will. We'd all live in terror of you, because at what point does it stop? You know, I can't think of the superhero story where this is, but it's where they move from things that are obvious crimes to moving further down. Like, like you were talking about my whole plan about you know keeping the Senate to 39 Republicans, right? Like, yeah, I'd have to either beat people up. I'd have to commit crimes to do that, right? Or, giving Mitch McConnell LSD every day, so that he couldn't get anything done. In every election, what you do is you take the candidates that you don't like and you give them LSD so they'd say ridiculous things, right?
You're a superhero. You could just toss them at the moon or something.
No, no, you wanna be invisible. You don't want anybody to know you're doing it. So you make all the kind candidates you don't like into ridiculous figures, right? And then nobody votes for them. So in other words, democracy doesn't exist. That's where superheroes are anti-democratic. Because if they really existed and really did the things that they would do to, it's like the thing about you know, Bruce Wayne, his parents have been killed, and he says to Alfred, "I know what I'll do. What, sir? You'll form a foundation. You'll have a think tank. You'll produce. You'll use your technology to produce more food, and you'll make you do all this stuff for the world." It's like, no, I'm going to dress up at night in my pajamas and beat poor people up, right? Like Bruce Wayne could do a lot more good for the world than running around in that costume.
Do you think he comes to grips with the fact that he knows that even if he keeps funneling money at a problem, it's just never going to go away? And he's kind of looking at it from more of like the individual aspect level where it comes to stopping robbers and stopping someone from getting killed in the street who might have a family. Like I look at that stuff, like even with the superpowers, and it brings up the moral argument. It's kind of like the question, if I asked you, are you happy? Nobody asks people that because, I mean, how do you answer that? I don't think anybody's genuinely fully fulfilled. I think everybody has wishes, dreams, and wants. I think in moments that you're happy, sure, but a lot of times people are just trying to make it to the next day on some aspects of things. But when it comes to the moral question of having a superpower, I mean, me, I would stay the farthest away from fucking politics. But it brings up, global debates. It brings up, do you get involved into things like that? And then what a lot of films have been showing recently, which is the fact of the rejection of society from superheroes in films. You saw that in Spider-Man, where he throws paint on Spider-Man's costume. He gets all the green all over him. I mean, Superman, people loving him and having their arms around him, then fearing him in some moments. So it's like, there's this kind of like other side of it, which I think is interesting that they bring in. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Samaritan with Sylvester Stallone.
No, but I've been meaning to watch it.
It's really good. But
Oh, good.
I mean, it's kind of the same old story of like a superhero that gives up the cape and everything like that and kind of just tries to live a normal life and has to get dragged back in like every other Indiana Jones movie. And come back, we got one more job for you. That's why they made like 5 lethal weapons. Um, but it's good in an aspect of it kind of shows a different side of the money, the looks, the glamour. It's kind of showing a more gritty, kind of humanistic version, much like you saw in the Joker, where you saw him get beat up on the bus. But he was like, obviously, he did not fit into society. He seemed a little bit off compared to, normal things, which I think is interesting. But there's these moral things. Like if I gave you with all your personalities right now, because whenever usually I dream of being a superhero, I don't think of who I am as this moment or what people view me as. I see myself as like what the powers are. But if you have OCD, if you have ADHD, if you have all that, what does that do when you have powers? What does that affect? You know what I mean? And I think that's another question. It's like being kind of more aware of the realistic thing, like where I say I don't think I would ever deserve superpowers if there was a Shazam thing that was going to happen. I'm not the 100% human Gandhi to be able to make that decision, and I believe anybody that was would eventually turn corrupt.
Exactly.
Because
Power corrupts.
yeah, there's no, and that happens. That's like asking me to be the president. Hell no, I don't want that responsibility. That's like a curse on somebody.
Oh, I know. Anybody who wants to be president isn't qualified to be president. Right? Like, because they want it for power. In fact, there was something they did in a high school, and instead of having elections like they do, they basically pick people randomly, and it ended up being a lot better because the people who like want to do it, there's all kinds of privilege that's reflected. The taller candidate for president usually wins, right? Why is that? Well, because height is privilege. Um, that what you actually would do, the thing that would be best is you'd get and you might have to threaten some people to do this, but you'd get a a a, uh, um, a constitutional amendment that everything has to be judged by the ontological vocation of humanization, which is a big old word, big old term. Um, that is the ultimate standard, universal standard for whether something is good or not and useful to society or not. And I can explain it. But like that should become the standard, and that would do a lot more good in the world than anything you could do with your fists. Right? It's like Batman says, in Dark Knight Returns, Joker, there's nothing wrong with you I can't fix with my hands. That's not really what needs to be done, right? Like, I make those jokes about doing that stuff, but that is not really what would make the world a better place. What would make the world a better place is, there's policies that we understand that work. Um, and we can put them in place, and there's countries that do things better, and it's measurable. And the ontological vocation of humanization, just really quickly, humanization is being more fully human, which means we all have potentials. We have physical, moral, social, relational, psychological, athletic, artistic, potential. And if you're fulfilling them, or working to fulfill them, then that's becoming more fully human, right? Like my dog just lays around, you know, poops in the backyard, sleeps on the couch, chases the squirrels. If I were doing that, people would be like, get a job, do something. But he has full caninization, right? So when you have a job that's dehumanizing, why is it dehumanizing? Because it turns you into a robot, right? Robot, the original word for robot was robotnik. And in Rossum's Universal Robots, they hacked off the nick. Robot Nick means worker in Czech. Robot means work thing in Czech, non-human worker, right? So jobs that are dehumanizing turn you into robots because they're not helping you to develop and fulfill your potential. So that's humanization. Vocation is pursuit of, right? You're pursuing your humanization, and it's also work. Vocation is work, right? You have to work for it. You don't get any, the Williams sisters didn't become great tennis players because they were just born that way. They had the potential. They had potential that I don't have, right? And then they developed it. It took work. So it's just a pursuit and work. Ontological is the of being. Anything that deals with the nature of reality is ontological. So anything that deals with God, cosmology, the meaning of the world, the meaning of existence, that's ontological. So it's a vocation of humanization, but it's not a psychological, sociological, personal vocation of humanization. It's an ontological vocation of humanization, right? And so that is the standard. If it promotes people's ontological vocation of humanization, it's good. If it doesn't, it's bad. So, like, everybody, all these people having guns doesn't actually promote people's ontological vocation of humanization, because, a 6-year-old just shot his teacher. That's not good. That 6-year-old should never have had that gun. Well, if you have guns all over the place, if you have more guns than people, they don't have that problem in Switzerland. Switzerland has a lot of guns. They don't have the problem in Canada. Canada has a lot of guns. It's because they have, controls over it. But point of that's just gun control is just an example. But that as a constitutional amendment, then the Supreme Court would have to judge everything against the ontological vocation of humanization. And it is pretty, you can talk to people about it, and people can kind of come to an agreement on what and how it works. And that's what I would do if I were a superhero, is I wrote the constitutional amendment on the ontological vocation of humanization, and then I would promote the idea so that everybody learned what it was. I'll give you an example. In La Crosse, Wisconsin, it's the best place to die in America. It might be Eau Claire. It's Wisconsin. Planet Money did a podcast on this. Is that 90% of people there have advanced directives and living wills, and it's much better. Everybody's happier. You know, people don't try to keep their parents alive on machines. You know, in a bad way. I mean, and what happened was this guy, it was his job to people about that stuff, and he didn't like talking to people. He trained nurses. He dumped it off on the nurses, and the nurses started doing it, and then it worked really well. And then when you check into the hospital, they're like, "So do you have your living will and advance directive?" And if you say no, they have you go sit over there with a counselor who, now, rather than a nurse getting $40 an hour, it's a counselor who gets $13 an hour, right? And they sign you up for it. And then what happened in the hospital was, 25% of Medicare goes to last year of life, right? And most of it's wasted because the things that happen in your last year of life, most of it should be palliative, but because people it's trying to be curative, it's just a waste of money. And so that the hospital started to lose money because their Medicare billings went down, but quality of care, people's happiness went up. That's the ontological of humanization. Happened was Sarah Palin came out and said death panels. That's what was supposed to pay for the Affordable Care Act, is lower the Medicare, because you cut into that 25% that goes to the last year of life, improve care, improve, make everybody better off. My dad is 93 years old, and I don't know what's going to happen, but like, having an advanced directive there and everybody in the family knowing what it is, I don't know what his plans are. I did. I should ask his wife that question, right? I should talk to my brothers about that question, but we haven't done it. Why? Because we don't know how to have that conversation. In that town in Wisconsin, they do know how to have that conversation. And that's what was supposed to happen with the Affordable Care Act. But Sarah Palin fucked us because she chose greed and glory over the ontological vocation of humanization. Now, it's provable. You can do math to show that this is a better policy, but we don't have it. That's what I would do as a superhero.
Isn't is Katie Couric had that hidden question when she interviewed Sarah Palin? She was like, "What do you read?" I was just like, no, because there's Robin Williams is probably my favorite comedian. His Weapons of Self-Destruction special talks about like the banks needing to be loaned out and everything, and they come back and goes, "Hey man, let me just get another $850 million." He goes, "What happened to the last $850 million we gave you to bail out the banks?" And they just go, "Well, there's a couple things we didn't factor in, like panic and greed." And it was just like it's stuff like that where it's like, yeah, I mean, I get it. Like the whole, I think that's establishing something like that, especially if you had superpowers, I think would be important. I don't view the world like if there was going to be superpowers, I wouldn't expect myself to be the only one with them. And I probably wouldn't want to be the only one with them. I think there needs to be like a regulation amongst other superheroes, but also there needs to be people that play their individual parts as well, too. I mean, what do you consider a win? It's like get the question if you ask somebody to give them God powers, a random person on Earth God powers, and they could do whatever they want. I think it's a movie by the same guy who made Hot Fuzz, if I'm not mistaken. But if you had God powers, what would you do with it? It was like, well, you can't just snap your fingers and clear up the whole world. Think from the individual perspective that you were just now gifted God powers. You would be able to stop a bus from hitting a person. You'd be able to do simple stuff like that just to help wherever you're located. And that goes back to the superheroes and their locations in cities. You're able to help out the area, but you can't cover the whole span of the world. You can't. That's why I like Black Adam so much, was he was in another country and he was focusing on that's their superhero. Yeah, the Justice Department, society, whatever, never came to that place and never cared about them until Black Adam showed up. And it showed something a little bit more of like a realistic basis of it can't just be an imaginary scenario where one superhero fixes everything. Superman can't do that. He might be able to go around the world. Omni-Man didn't even do any of that. So you get to like this point where I think that brings in more of like what I would want to see in like superheroes is this more moral value and kind of moral understanding as well too. But it's like coming to grips with what you can control as a person. I mean, when I watch the superhero movies now, after talking with like historians, not only people that look into comics like yourself, but other people that like look into movies and kind of the inner meanings of stuff, I start to notice a little bit more of like what, I think everyone envisions themselves in a film and try to see what would they do if they were in this situation. We do it with zombie films. But I just kind of look at it like from like a moral thing, like what could I handle? Could I handle the stress of being, Shazam and then having to go to school and then also be able to have superpowers as well too and be able to, and same thing with Peter Parker. So it's like I don't think I would be able to do it.
Well, that's interesting because if you look at the first year of Superman, the first 12 issues of Action Comics and Superman #1, he's the only one with powers, right? And he runs around and what does he do? Well, he stops an unjust execution, right? He beats up a wife beater, right? He then what does he do? He goes into a mine, right? He takes an arms manufacturer and drops him in a war to get him to realize the consequences of his actions. He takes Blakely Mines and takes Mr. Blakely down in the mine and he collapses it, right? And so then he's like, oh, the safety devices, oh, they don't work, And at the end, he's like, I'm going to build the safest mine in the country. Okay, that's fine. He does all that. And then he goes to war against bad drivers. And what he does is he starts taking out individual people and their cars. And then during the Depression, he causes the Bates Motor Factory, he wrecks the Bates Motor Factory. During the Depression, wrecks the Bates Motor Factory, right? And there's a sharp turn on a highway, and he goes and hacks out the hillside. That's unconstitutional takings, right? He straightens out the road, makes the world, but he takes somebody's property away, right? Which the government is not allowed. Well, the government actually is allowed to do that through eminent domain, but that's what he does on his own. And at the end, he takes the mayor and he shows him all the dead bodies, and then but the thing is, all of that stuff that he does, you can accomplish through ordinary democratic action. Make better laws, make better enforcement, right? And then there's the one where Superman basically goes crazy. He also does a thing where like he stops, gambling on college football. He stops these people trying to like take over circus. He takes these stock swindlers and they've sold stock for a oil field, right, which is dry. And then he buys all the stock as Clark Kent. He buys all the stock, and then he goes in and he gets oil to come up out of the ground, and then, oh, the stock's worth all this money, he distributes it and stuff. But all of that's just regulation. And then in the last one, these kids are going, these kids are criminals, right? And the mother's like, oh, if they only lived in better environment. And he decides that the slums are bad environment. So he moves everybody out of a neighborhood and he destroys their houses so that the federal government comes in and builds good housing. Imagine that, Superman, like, there's this guy and he's literally destroyed, and they send the Army Air Corps in to bomb him, and he's like, great, they're blowing up the houses. Imagine how many pets are killed during that.
That sounds a little too biblical, like the whole God thing where he burns and kills the guy's family and he's sitting on a pile of ants and then he
Yeah.
gives them.
And then you know what happens in the next issue? The Ultra Humanite comes in. The Ultra Humanite, it starts out as this like bad union story, right? This corrupt taxi union, and it turns out it's run by the Ultra Humanite. Ultra Humanite is bald. He's basically Lex Luthor before Lex Luthor.
Why does bald mean bad guy?
Well, I don't know, but he the Ultra Humanite, can turn cars invisible, and he has superpowers basically, and he's not part of society. So up until Action Comics number 11, Superman is doing things that we humans could get together and fix, right? We could improve regulations, we could change laws, we could, make it so you can't bet on college football, so the coaches can't bet on college football. We could, make it easier for circus owners to report extortion. We could do all of those things, but we can't fight people who can turn stuff invisible. So what happens to Superman is he goes from being a social revolutionary to being a social reactionary. From trying to change what is to protecting what is from outside evil. And there's a great issue of Spider-Man where Peter Parker is walking down the street and he sees Matt Gargan, the Scorpion, sitting there drinking coffee. He's like, he sits down with him, he talks to him, and Matt Gargan tells him a story about how, yeah, after World War II ended, the government was just like, what are we going to do with these superheroes? They're going to get ideas and they're going to do shit. So they created supervillains. They hired a bunch of ex-GIs, right? Gave them powers, and then ultimately Osborn got involved in it. And that's why you ever notice how like certain supervillains go after certain superheroes over and over again? Yeah, that's because they get named. And then ultimately what happens is Osborn and others, they just, they start to get powers on their own and they take it over from the government. But in that issue of Spider-Man, basically supervillains are the antibodies to superheroes. Superheroes are a virus because the government that superheroes are going to get out of control with their own power, and they're going to start actually changing things for ways that the power structure doesn't want things
Well,
changed.
that's like Abomination and the Incredible Hulk.
Exactly.
It's interesting. I like that type of thing. Because I do think, I mean, if you do have like, I think it's with the Superman movie with Henry Cavill, where they has him in handcuffs and he just breaks him real quick and says, "You can't control me." And then, like when you say that to like a governing body or military like that, they're like, "We have to have a backup plan." It's always kind of what it is. What is this backup plan? Even they tried to work with General Zod, I think, at one point before they realized he was nuts. But I mean, that's the same thing. Like, imagine you're trying to change all this stuff through the political system, and you're a superhero, and then someone just creates an enemy to go against you because they don't like you. That's always going to happen. There's always going to be a resisting force. It just, I don't know. I think everything inherently causes risk. I just don't know that you're going to be able to solve the world's problems. I mean, even with the gun stuff as well too. It's like, what do you do there? I don't even own a gun. I'm not. I guess individual freedoms, but there is issues with guns, and there's other countries that do it better. I think the UK, but even in the UK, they banned guns, and then there's knife stabbings that went up. So it's like people are going to still do bad. It's just about there's no way to eliminate the bad people. It's just about trying to.
All right. Yeah, it's so this guy in Australia is walking around in the streets with a bat, hitting cars with his bat. But all he does is he dents a couple cars, which is unfortunate. But I didn't even see, I don't even think he broke a window. He just dented cars, right? And I'm surprised nobody ran him over. But if he had had, an AR-15, all those people would have been killed, right? You know? Um, so that's the difference between having guns and guns is that guns can do, yeah, but yeah, sure. They have knifing attacks. People who take cars and run people over, right? It became a terror thing in England. But you just can't do as much damage. And guns allow you to do that. And the other thing that happened was, remember in 1963, the NRA changed from being a shooting organization about gun safety and shooting that believed in gun control, and they got overtaken, and now they're just a marketing arm of the gun industry. And they took the Second Amendment, which had a meaning for hundreds of years, and they changed the meaning of it. Right? Heller, that case was put forward by the NRA ultimately, right? I mean, they found somebody, they found Heller to be perfect uh, um, plaintiff, and they changed the amendments Amendment from being a collective right of self-defense, right? A well-regulated militia being necessary. They just changed the meaning of that. And they made it an individual right. It didn't used to be an individual right. Well, that's something we could change back.
I would say the NRA is probably like there's some type of relationship with the military industrial complex, so nobody complains about the amount of
No, no,
weapons that we do make.
they're owned by the gun manufacturers.
That makes sense.
Like the people who make guns, the NRA is just a political and marketing arm for the gun manufacturers. And so they have taken political stance to change the meaning of the law. They've changed our laws. Our laws used to be our laws, and now
That's
they're not.
yeah, but that's just the military industrial complex.
No, no, no. It's specifically gun manufacturers. It's a commercial industrial thing, not military. It's commercial. It's companies that do gun sales. They make guns and they sell guns. It really have to do with the larger thing. It's specific. If you look at what happened to the NRA since 1973, when they kicked out the sportsmen and the hunters and the target shooters, and the and the actual gun manufacturers took it over. Um, that's when that's when it's happening. Also, you know what the first school massacre was? It took place in like I don't know. It's either like 19. I think it was before World War One, and it was this guy who was mad because they were consolidating the school districts, and his taxes went up, and so he got a job as a handyman at the school, and he packed the school full of explosives. He was going to kill every child in the school district, the consolidated school district in Michigan, right? And so he set it off, and I don't know, he had some issue with it or whatever. And then he shows up. He's got a gun, and everybody thinks, oh, he's just the guy who works here. And he gets in a fight with the principal and stuff. They're struggling over his gun, and they shot him. They went out to his farm, and he had killed all his horses and killed his wife and stuff. And um, yeah, so part of what we need to do is end this grievance culture. And the problem is the grievances get fed by people who get political benefit from it. You know, so
I agree.
that's what I would call a superhero.
I agree. I just whenever it gets down to like Democratic or Republican type ideas, I just look at it like to me I can't I honestly I know people say what do you mean you can't you don't you if you're a Republican you support fascism. I don't support either. I guess it's the benefits of believing more in like a military industrial complex idea. And that's just through my research of the 60s and 70s when you look into like the intelligence agencies. I mean, a lot of people don't know what the official Church Commission report actually was. I mean, they're talking I didn't know this. The CIA's influence on campuses for college students. I didn't know about that. I didn't know about, well, obviously we know about mail intercepts and wiretapping and things of the sort that the FBI was doing, but COINTELPRO. I mean, invading the Black Panther Party, putting in free radicals because they consider them a threat. And then you kind of look at it like, I mean, these are long institutions and they're still doing that. And this isn't just something that happened during a one presidency. This has been continuing for a very long time. And there's a lot of stuff going on even today that the intelligence communities that are doing. And we're not talking about them. And half the people you ask them about, academic influence on campuses or CIA influence on academic campuses, they go, that sounds like a conspiracy. I was like, it's fucking real. And it's in their church
It's a
report.
conspiracy. It's literally a conspiracy.
They had
I
a
know.
heart attack gun you can watch on YouTube where the guy pulls up a heart attack gun in front of William Colby during the church committee hearings. And he goes, what is this? And the guy goes, it fires a dart about approximately 100 meters and it goes into someone's skin. And within 24 hours, they will have a cardiac arrest. And you're like, what? And the guy looks down it. And I'm like, don't look down it. And Frank Church later died of cancer, but that's whatever. People could say conspiracy on that. But I mean, look, I read that 700-page thing, and I can tell you at the end of it, that it just looks like a whitewash. Nobody paid a price. There was no transparency. That was one little blip that they had, and then it was gone out of the public's eye. And it's like, how do you get somebody to care about something? How do you get people onto the discussion of like what's a conspiracy and what's real? And I was like, that goes back and forth. The only time we ever hear about scandals now is when it's a certain political party either covering a scandal on their side or they're blaming the other side for having a scandal. And that's all the media has ever been for me when every time I watch it. It's like the only reason we can ever talk about CIA on campus or something like that if it goes with their guy or it goes against the other opposition. And I was like, well, let's look at the bigger picture of things as well too. And obviously that's a minority view that I have. A lot of people would want to believe either Republican or Democrats are the issue. And I'm like, it's like the CIA working with the mafia. I can't tell two and two apart. You guys might have some different, obviously, boundaries on things, but I'm not saying you, I'm just meant Democrat, Republican. But there's like even libertarian. I thought I was that for the longest time, but I'm not a burn it down government guy. I think you just need to kind of recognize that obviously every country's up to their own nefarious shit, but we don't even respect it here or recognize it here. And if we do, it has to be this kill all of them or get them all out type mentality. I was like, there are a selected few that are probably just following orders, but there's a couple people that have really, whether it's the power that corrupted them. I mean, you could say that about Hoover, and Hoover's a horrible guy, but cross dresser. I have photos to prove it. So I'm just saying,
Nothing wrong with being a cross-dresser.
at the time what he was doing rating for homosexuals and getting out communists out of movies, and then he was doing that on the
Right.
side. Even the own FBI was like, what the hell is
You talk about hypocrisy, then
yeah. But
maybe, but
with
in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with people dressing however they want to dress.
with Hoover, it's like he had the purist mentality, and you kind of just go, well, what did that stem from? And I looked at his childhood. He didn't start out that way. He Once he became that director, it was like you get everybody's blackmail, all that type of stuff that's going on. There's no way you don't turn into a villain.
Oh yeah, yeah. And though, I mean, if you look at the political parties, the thing is that Republicans don't actually want to do anything except for cut taxes on the wealthy, and 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 then the nuts have taken over it, and that it's Eisenhower's fault. It's Eisenhower's fault. In like 1956, he went to Wisconsin on a campaign trip, and he wanted to denounce McCarthy, right? And his advisors were like, "We need those votes. We don't want to piss off the wingnuts, the John Birchers and everything." That's the original sin of the Republic. I used to think it was Goldwater. It's not. It's Eisenhower.
Goldwater was on the church committee.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And Goldwater was his presidential run was nuts. Other things he did wasn't so bad, but like, but it's that Eisenhower refused. He took the politically expedient thing, and he would have won the presidential elections. Actually aren't won by candidates, but he would have won the. I'll tell you what that is in a second. He would have won the 1950 election regardless of what the John Birchers thought. But he just he took the coward way out, and he didn't stand up to Joe McCarthy, and that's where that that crazies in the Republican Party grew. They've grown and grown and grown since then. And then Nixon using the Southern strategy, and then Reagan using the Southern strategy, and so forth. President, you should look up something called "The 13 Keys to the White House" by Alan Lichtman. Do you know that? Oh, it's fascinating. So he's a political scientist, and he and another professor after the election found these 13 keys that if you flip them, if there are 6 that are flipped towards the party in power, then they win. And if it's less than 6, they lose. And he started predicting elections. He predicted in 2000, and he's got a 2006 edition of his book. And he said, well, it's the Democrats in 2008, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, I don't know, but it's them. And he did this, and he's been right every time. 2000, and he got the vote right. He got the national vote right. He didn't get the electoral vote right. Although, if you look back at those 20,000 old Jews for Buchanan, butterfly ballots, they didn't vote for Buchanan, right? Gore actually won Florida. But then he did it all the way forward, and he waited until in 2016, he waited until September, and he was like, look, I don't like this, but Trump's going to win. And Trump won. And then in 2020, he called it for Biden. relatively, for him, relatively late, but the same year. And he ran it, but at some point he ran it backwards. He ran it backwards to 1860, which is the first Republican Democratic with Lincoln, and it works every time except 1876 when it went to the House with Hayes. Right? He is the most correct predictor of presidential elections. And the only thing that matters about the candidate are charismatic incumbent or charismatic challenger. And the people who count as charismatic are like, or war hero, are like Grant, Eisenhower, Teddy Roosevelt, the other Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt,
JFK.
Kennedy, yeah, Kennedy, Reagan, Obama. So charisma is rare. Trump doesn't count as charismatic. Charismatic or war hero, basically it means that people who don't necessarily agree with you politically will vote for you because they like you as a person. They like the candidate as a person. And there hasn't been a charismatic candidate since Obama.
Yeah.
And so those things don't matter. And right now, Biden has 6 or 7. I did it. I looked at it one day. Some of them are like technical, like the amount of growth in the economy over a certain period. Other things are objective. Did the party in power of the president gain seats or lose seats in the midterm election? Incumbent. Um, there's just these things, and the interesting thing is right now Biden is at 6 or 7. Um, and like, is there a major scandal, foreign policy victory, foreign policy disaster, um changed politics, in some major way through legislation. There's got a set of legislation passed that really had an effect. And so actually the funny thing is, with all the presidential politics, people vote on macro issues in the end. And so a lot of the stuff that people get worked up about presidential elections don't actually matter.
There's a like even with because I'm big into the JFK topic. Um, when you look at the debates between Nixon and Kennedy, and there was a conspiracy for a while, but there's actually enough documentation to really back it up once you kind of look at the more organized crime angle, where as historians talk about it. And they go, Kennedy won because of the mob. And I was like, well, that sounds like a conspiracy. Kennedy didn't win because of the mob. And if you look at like the states like where Traficante was located, where Sam Giancana was located, there's a good amount of pull that was exactly for Kennedy in around that time that election happened.
Yeah, there's an excellent chance that Nixon won Illinois.
I don't know who the mob. I don't think there was a mob boss in Illinois.
No, well, Daley depends on how you count Daley.
Oh, I meant
Mayor of
like
Chicago.
the big ones, like Sam Giancana was the mob boss of Chicago.
Yeah, but Daley was the Democratic machine boss, right? But if you look at the electoral votes, it wasn't enough. Kennedy still won the electoral vote count. So like, I'm not that familiar with exactly the thing you're talking about, but um it does align with the 13 keys. So
Well, if you read like the history of like Allen Dulles, or if you read like Hoover, you just learn more about him. I don't like a lot of people in the Kennedy assassination will say it was a right wing conspiracy. I just look at Hoover and I look at Allen Dulles. It's like I don't get a sense of right wing at all. I get a sense of extremist, very extremist, and I think that gets labeled because some of their views might fit some certain right wing stuff. And like I said, I'm not left or right here. I'm just kind of looking at it from like looking at a humanistic kind of person perspective. And if you look at like Alan Dulles was in charge of MK Ultra, I mean, I don't think anybody wants to verify or accept the fact, no matter, you can blame any political party this, but I'm pretty sure everybody doesn't want this to happen, to be drugging people's drinks and doing horrible experimentation with LSD on people. But these are people that got into positions where it was like fuck it money, where you just go, I can do whatever the hell I want and I don't have to worry about any ramifications.
well, Dulles approved MK Ultra. He wasn't running it. I forget the name of the guy who was
It's
running.
Helms and Dulles. Dulles was in charge of the program, though. It's what another thing in the Kennedy assassination that sadly Tucker Carlson had to say that I've been saying for months was that the same doctor who gave Jack Ruby a flu shot was Joyon West. Now, Luis Joyon West was the guy, and you can look this up on YouTube. He was a UCLA professor that was working with Sidney Gottlieb in the MK Ultra project. He was in
Yeah,
chop.
Gottlieb. Yes.
He was in charge of Operation Midnight Climax, of dropping at those Haight Ashbury clinics, dressing up as hippies and dropping. That was him, and he was not only the same therapist for Jack Ruby, but same therapist for Charles Manson, same therapist for Timothy McVeigh in the Oklahoma City bombings. Like, so, like, whatever you want to get super conspiratorial, but I have documentation to show that this guy, and I've been saying it months before Tucker Carlson even, he kind of crappily said it, but I didn't want it to be a right-wing conspiracy, and now it's getting labeled as that because he said it. But there was real evidence to support, like, this Joyon West character. Now, Alan Dulles would not have known that at all. He would have not known that Ruby would have been visited by Joyon West. But there was like this weird kind of cover-up aspect, and obviously we don't have to get into the conspiracy of the Kennedy assassination because I'll just start ranting like crazy. But there is like a bunch of weird things that start happening where I was like, what do you explain MK Ultra as? And nobody can label it as a political party because none of these scientists, researchers, they were looking at it like the government's going to give me money to be able to do some really good research on things that haven't been explored yet. I was like, so what's like the lore? And obviously there's real problems today we can fix that can get nailed a certain side, like conservative or whatever you want. There's issues, obviously. But I mean, like when it comes to like systemic stuff, like FBI running organization, how much has it been? Nothing but severe radicals. And that comes from being in that position for a very long time and being up to those nefarious things. I mean, working with organized crime ain't good, but the way that they, if you listen to like what the actual plan was, plausible deniability, government wasn't trying to assassinate Castro, it was the mob. It was like, damn it, they're not wrong, but it's a lawyer speaking. I hate it.
Yeah, but the funny thing about the whole MK Ultra was that it grew out of a belief that the communists had brainwashing, and they didn't. Like we believe US believed the communist propaganda.
Men who stare at goats.
And yeah, exactly. And some of that propaganda was actually some of that whole MK Ultra stuff was, designed so that they would believe that we had things that we didn't have. And it's like Yuri Geller, right? You know, although he might have been Mossad anyway. But like that they brought him into that whole thing because he had superpowers. And although here's the superhero thing, Yuri Geller showed up in an issue of Daredevil.
Did they mention like his actual name, or is he just
Oh no,
under a
he's
different?
in there as a character.
Whoa.
Yuri Geller is in the Marvel universe. It's in the mid 70s. Yeah, and the funniest thing is there's a letter in an issue a couple issues later. There's a letter from somebody who at Kent State University. Uh, um, it was the father of somebody I was in school with. I don't want to get the name wrong, so I'm not gonna say the name. But I could look it up. Yeah, there's a letter in an issue of Daredevil about Yuri Geller. Um, After Yuri Geller shows up as a character.
That's crazy. I, like,
Bring it back to superheroes where we started.
yeah, well, that's like even with like the MK Ultra movie that came out recently. It's not that good. I've I've talked to like Stephen Kinzer who wrote books on it. Tom O'Neill, I've just emailed him back and forth. I don't know if you ever read his book about the Manson murders. It's called Chaos. But 20, he works for The Intercept. It's got a good article on The Intercept about it. But that MK Ultra movie, dude, they made it seem like giving people LSD was a good thing. It was better than getting a lobotomy. And I was like, bruh, I was like, you could have just went by the historical record and got it really, really good just by following that. But that
It's
goes,
just Bourne. That's just the Bourne movies, and then there's that movie. It's a great movie, Long Kiss Goodnight. You know, Gina Davis and Samuel L. Jackson. She's a CIA operative agent who they wipe her mind and then they reactivate her and stuff.
oh,
And,
sleeper agents. I just
yeah,
like
it's
the
got
LSD experimentation to me is like really, really dope. I mean, not like dope as in like drugs, but dope as in good. It's just like, it's just brutal. Like you start like kind of looking into like the experimentation on it.
shit they did with that cop in New York City who and then they bring Johns in and dose these guys. They get them prostitutes and then they dose them and then
They used aerosol sprays too. That's what's nuts.
I know that when you read that stuff, you're like, oh my God.
That's Joy on West's project too. That's his baby. And then like you see him on the fucking you see him in the Kennedy assassination, you're like, oh my God, I don't know what my mind's gonna break. And it's like, I don't know, like that, like, dude, when you look in like I think what's interesting to me is like when you ask people about COINTELPRO, they'll be like, oh yeah, it was the FBI invading the Black Panther Party. I was like, yeah, but to the extent where they found the white donor's mailing address and they sent them a fake coloring book. And it was like, I mean, I had the coloring book to like look through the pictures, and it's just like, it's obviously none of it's true. And it got me interested in the Fred Hampton assassination, where I go, half the time, like, I mean, my nephews are a couple of years younger than me. But like even my little cousins or something, they know about this stuff and they're really big activists against it. And I was like, but you do know why you should be mad though. Like that's the thing. And then like I show them a little bit deeper about like COINTELPRO and stuff like that. And like I had no idea. It was like these are just hardcore extremists as well too. I was like, that's why I say you lose people when you say like a right wing and left wing and all that. And I'm not saying you, I'm just saying in a lot of conversations, it's like to me, it's just like look at these as like as extremists, like because then it gets everybody on board, even people that might be of the party you think it might be, because then they can root out the evil.
And that's the thing, bringing it back to superheroes. If we had real superheroes, those would be the people who would be running them, right? Like, um, Alan Moore dealt with that, with the comedian and and stuff like that. That's what it would really be. Um, and independent people, running around doing stuff. That's the Marvel Cinematic Universe has had to deal with that. It's like, how do you know how do you have this thing where these people basically have their own ability to affect reality? They wouldn't just be allowed to be running around out there doing stuff. They'd get hunted down and then they get turned. And then ultimately, there's a Squadron Supreme does a good job of this. Um, it's the kind of recent one. By recent, I mean like 20 years ago, but where they take this guy who's got these superpowers and the I forget what the character's name is, but he dumps him in this hole and he has gas on him. He doesn't have the person doesn't have the ability to resist gas, and they're like, why do he's been killing people, like, he's like, I like killing. And then what they do is they release him to go out and just like go into like Syria and other places and just murder government officials. Like that's what he becomes. That's what superpowers become, is become this politics. But have you ever read Startling Stories Banner?
Mm.
Oh, Richard Corbin. It's fantastic. I'm teaching it this year. It's Bruce Banner. The gamma bomb is the Hulk. So like they take it opens with it's Bruce Banner and he wakes up. He's like, oh, and he's like, oh, he's in an airplane and he's strapped to this thing and he looks down and then the bomb door opens beneath him and he's like, ah, and he drops, right? And of course, by the time he hits the ground, he's the Hulk. And the Hulk is mad. And then people are shooting at him. So that's what the federal government, US government does with the Hulk, is rather than using an atomic bomb to take out, you drop the Hulk in a city and he just wipes shit out. And then it's just like, oh, there was a gas leak explode. The gas pipe blew up. It's called Startling Stories Banner, and it's a great story. It's where if you know in the Ang Lee movie, there was this scene, it didn't make it in the movie, but where like he puts the gun in his mouth and he shoots, and then the Hulk spits out the bullets. Like the Hulk won't let Banner be killed.
That's in the movie.
And the story, yeah, that's it. It was you can find it on YouTube. There's a scene that they cut out of the Hulk spitting out the bullets, right? And it ends with Doc Samson turns up the gas. Bruce wants to die. He's seen it, right? But Doc Samson turns up the gas on this. Bruce is in this little tent and with happy gas, and he turns it up, and you see his heartbeat go do 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 do, and then it's green. Do 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 do. Like the Hulk won't let Bruce Banner be killed. But that's what the government does with the Hulk is it uses him as this way to punish countries that they don't, it's plausible deniability, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it was the Hulk. We couldn't do anything about it, but they dropped it on this. They dropped the Hulk on the city, and you know, that's where superheroes are obviously a fantasy, and it can't be even like quote unquote real stuff, right? Like the boys is pretty good about that, like what it would actually be. Um and it's interesting the way that they go is that they're going to try to get out of the superhero thing and just go to the V24 compound so that they can sell it to make soldiers super powered for a day. um and it's funny because the V24, if you use it too many times, it kills you, and that seems to be a flaw in it, but it wouldn't be. That would be, I bet they're going to reveal that that's intentional because they don't want, Vought wants to get out of the superhero business, because it's just silly, and they just want to enable short-term superpowers so the government can use them as soldiers and do what it wants to do, but not have anybody like Homelander come along and be superpowered permanently, right? And because if they do that, they would die. Like what's going to happen with Butcher. Um, that's why actually like the Boys is a really good look at what probably would be, and it's bad. It's superheroes are bad for the world. That's the same thing that happens in a lot of like if you read Marvels, Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. It tells a story of Phil. I can't remember his last name. He's a photographer, and he's there in World War II. It goes from the Human Torch, which is the first thing in the Marvel universe, to just after the death of Gwen Stacy. So from like 1939 to 1974 or something like that. And it shows, I thought it was, and I have this in my book about, it's this rediscovery of the kind of joy of superheroes. There's this scene where what he does is Busiek charts the Marvel universe like really precisely. He looks at everything that was published. He does this timeline of everything that happened. He discovers like, oh, this was happening and this was happening. That's why the X-Men couldn't be here because they were doing this. It's really complex. And like it shows when the Thing hits Galactus and he falls off the building and he catches himself. He's standing on air, but it's which Kirby draws, but when Ross draws it, it's like, oh my God, it reinvigorates that sense of wonder. But it ends with Danny Ketch, and when I read it originally, I didn't know who Danny Ketch was, and it looks like the sun is coming out from behind the clouds because it's like, oh, things are going to be good now. Danny Ketch is the Ghost Rider, the really bad one, like the grim and gritty Ghost Rider. And it's the sun is not coming out from behind the clouds. The clouds are going in front of it. Is that Busiek wrote this great book, which seems to be about superheroes being great, and it's about superheroes being bad. There is a ride. You ever been to Universal Studios in Florida?
A long time ago.
Well, if you go, there's a great ride. It's
I
a
didn't have a
Spider-Man.
childhood, Peter. I didn't have a childhood. I'm kidding.
Well, I did this as an adult. I did this like 6 years ago with my kids. So you go and it's Spider-Man ride, and you're in the Daily Bugle news van,
Oh yeah,
and
real
you're
quick. The guy's name of the reporter for in the movies, the Sam Raimi version. The guy, their God damn it, what's his name? The main dude, mustache, giant mustache.
yeah, J. Jonah Jameson.
The guy, there's the other guy, his co-assistant, um, gray hair.
Robbie Robertson.
That's me. That's me.
Oh,
My
that's
name's
funny.
Robbie Robertson. I didn't know that. I saw it. I was like, wait a minute.
Oh, huh, that's cool. Anyway, so you're riding around this news van, right? And like, at some point, Hydro Man pops up, you get sprayed with water, you're like, ah! And then Electro jumps on the front and puts, ah! And it's electric. Man, I do not fucking want to live in the Marvel universe. Like that's what it showed. It showed how awful it would be to just, you're trying to go about your business and fucking scorpions coming down the street doing shit, right? Like it's awful. And it's actually a really amazing ride because it's a great ride. It's fantastic as a ride. It's like if you go down to Universal Studios, that Harry Potter thing, they have a whole Harry Potter world. And it's like it's in two parks, so you have to buy for two parks, and there's a train that goes across it, and they have the train station, and they have this thing set up so you actually disappear into the 10 and a half. Oh, it's marvelous. And you go, there's a dragon that breathes fire and the Gringold Bank and stuff. But you go down into the main one and you're in these things and you're flying over while they're playing Quidditch. And you're flying, and it's both practical and 3D and stuff. Um,
I'm still recovering from Christmas.
yeah, the Hulk ride is also great. But I have a picture of myself sitting in the Fantastic Four car. But that Spider-Man ride demonstrates to you in a very real way what it would be like to live in a superhero universe. And it is not happy. Like the mental illness of people in the DCU and the MCU, they have a lot more problems because, weird shit can happen all the time. you know you have this, you have a grandfather and he's great and stuff, and then it turns out he was a Nazi supervillain. you know and all this horrible stuff happens, besides the whole idea of like the universe changes on you, when they do a retcon and you kind of remember this old family. Kurt Busiek has a great one in Astro City about that like that there's these self-help groups about people who remember the way the universe used to be before they did a big, reconfiguration of the universe. And that it would really be awful to be an ordinary person in superhero universe. And actually, most superheroes aren't actually happy, right? Like they don't, if you look at them, their lives are
Yeah.
just full of these fights and think about how many of them have bad relationships because they're always having to take off and do stuff, you know? Um, although it's funny because in my novel Odd Men, I'm making the argument that no, superheroes are good.
Well, Peter, why don't you let people know where they can? We've almost been talking 2 hours, man.
Yeah, I know we got to
Yeah.
stop.
Uh,
And actually, I've 7% left on my power. So.
but where can people find your links, man? I want to make sure people can
Oh,
find them.
I don't have anything. I don't really have a good social media presence. I mean, I'm on Facebook, but I don't have anything specifically for this stuff. It's something that I've been wanting to develop, but I haven't decided to. I haven't taken the actions to promote myself as like a public intellectual in the way that I could.
You are
So
though.
I'm just me. Oh no, I know, and I could be more, and I think I want to do that more, but I haven't. So I mean, I'm on Facebook, Peter Coogan. Um, that's about it.
Well, I'm gonna link that in the description. I appreciate the time you gave me to talk on my show, and thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank.